sell my house. That's the problem. Thank you, whoever did that. I think it was Holland. So the avenue is, how do you go after more opportunities, right? It's a skill. It's understanding the seller's position, and more so after you go after your presentation, right? How do you navigate the conversations of objections, right? And I'm going to tell you firsthand the 3 most common objections you're going to deal with, okay? And I've been doing this for a while. I understand. Talk to the top agents and they're going to probably tell you the 3 top objections, okay? Do you guys want to know what the 3 top objection handlers are? Okay, it's simple. It's price, terms, and conditions. Okay, price, terms, and conditions. That's what the seller may come back to you as asking you, hey, you want to list the property? They're going to have their own conclusion, right? If they're a savvy seller, right, and they know their position is, where do they get most of their resources from? The price. Where do they get that information? Online, right? What else? Where else do they get their information? Come on. What is it? Someone said it.
Or a friend.
Yeah, okay. A friend.
An agent?
Okay, agents, flyers. What about your neighbor? The neighbor just put the property on the market and you're curious, right? Well, it's only a 2 doors down and they listed it for what? So if they listed that house, my house has to be that or more, right? So that's where the sellers get their information, right? Online, neighbors that put their property on the market or the surrounding area, right? So how do you become that expert? How do you become that go-to person that's consistently getting more and more listings? Okay, so I want to dive deep into this conversation because it's very, very important to understand every element and how you can get more market share, more opportunities, get in, get out with an executed listing agreement in place, right? Now, the listing agreement is not that complex. If you understand the bullet points of what it is, this is obviously a copy of it. Let me take this off real quick. Okay, and let me spread this up a little bit more. So the listing agreement, and I'm going to just jump right into it and avoid all these disclosures. The listing agreement is something like this, right? Residential listing agreement and exclusive authorization and right to sell, right? So here's a perspective that I created just as a general sample, right? Here's what a listing agreement should look like, all right? Now, when you go in front of a seller, are you going to slap them with that listing agreement? I have a listing price of $669. Can you sign, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? No, right? What do you have to do before you even have all this in place? Yeah, you got to do comparables, right? Apples to apples, right? So the objective here is, are you the agent of choice, but are you really engaged and understand the market, right? You got to do your thank you. You got to do your comps. That's very, very important. So thank you, and I've omitted them. You got to know your local comps, right? Because when you're going in front of a seller, they're going to ask you, you know, what do you think my property is worth? Or they're already going to have their own perspective, right? Well, how is it that house over here is listed for 1.2 million, right? Then you're going to go backtracking to realize, okay, what am I missing here? Because remember, at the end of the day, it's an opinion of value. It's an opinion of value, right? I can get 3 agents to go there in front of the seller, prepare the comparable market analysis, right? And present it to the seller. And guess what's going to happen? You're gonna get 3 different opinions of value. Nothing is set in stone. At the end is what the buyer is willing to pay for it. It's not what I say, it's not what the seller says, it's what the buyer is willing to pay for the property. Right? And more so is how the condition of the home. Who doesn't like pretty homes, right? So do you think that the consumer will pay more for a home that's pretty? The answer is yeah, right? Absolutely. So those are things that you as a professional realtor need to understand. Because if I send you right now to Hancock Park, does everyone know where Hancock Park is? Most of you do, most of you don't, right? So how do you prepare for something that prestigious in a neighborhood that has a lot of history? Okay, and if you know the city and you know that area, it's a very specific neighborhood, very specific. And one house to the other is going to have different values. Why? Because the homes are not cookie cutters. If you go to Riverside, if you go to San Bernardino, where there's a community, right, cookie cutter homes, meaning they're all pretty much similar, right? That's an easy breezy type of comps, right? Because they're all comparables. They're all built in the same year. They're all, and models are pretty similar, right? 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, right? But in an area that is well established and has history of not just celebrities, movie stars, high-end clients, you know, government officials that live in this community, you know, that people are willing to pay a little bit more. Does that make sense? Okay, so we all want to be on the same page, is how do you navigate a great, impactful listing presentation, right? Hold on one second. If you could please unmute yourself, that would be great. I hear background. I think I got that. And who else do I need to mute? Mute. All right. So I think I've muted some of the people. I think Susie, I need to mute too as well. And again, just if you do have any questions, make sure to raise your hand on this. I have Christina also that I need to mute. I apologize. Okay. There we go. So the whole purpose of today's class is to really dive deep into the opportunities, and more so being that go-to agent that consistently gets more and more listings. Because once you become the local expert in the neighborhood, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get more opportunities. You're going to get people calling you saying, hey, I know that you sold ABC Street over there on the other side of the street, right? That's going to give you a perspective that it's something that you didn't have to do any lead generation, right? It was people that know you, right? If you do consistent open houses too, that's where you're going to generate opportunities, right? Because have you come across a situation where you may be doing an open house, someone comes in, you don't know, you just greet them, and they say, you know, I know you, I've seen you. And then you'll ask, well, how do you know of me? Well, I've seen your signs, right? And that's where you get a lot of these top agents get so branded in the neighborhood. You want to be that brand in the neighborhood because that's where the opportunities come in, okay? So the listing agreement, now there's many listings agreements, right? There's vacant land, business opportunity, commercial, multifamily, retail, industrial listing agreements. We're just going to focus on the residential listing agreement, okay? This is for a single family, duplex, triplex, fourplex, all right? That's it. That's where you use the listing agreement in place. Now, there's a lot of jargon in this agreement, okay? But this is an example of what I use for you to kind of navigate and get an understanding, right? And I'm not going to go deep dive into this. I just want you to kind of use this as an example of what's something that, you know, your agents would utilize, right? Obviously, you need to know who the sellers. In this case, how many sellers are on this agreement? Anyone?
3.
We have Lisa.
So I have
Three.
twice, right? So you caught that, right? You caught that. I did that intentionally, okay?
Woo!
But there's actually three buyers. There's one, and then there's two, and then there's three. So it should be three. Three on the listing agreement. Now, you're being employed, you're employed by Keller Williams, right? The agreement is from December 8, 2022 to June 8, 2023, right? So that's where the beginning and the end date of the expiration. That's where where it starts with the MLS, right? When you put that in there, that's your start point. That's where you start on the MLS. You input it on the multiple listing service as of December 8th. What if you got the property, say December 4th, right? That's the date that it was prepared. The date that it starts and the date it expires, okay? Meaning that if you don't sell it by June 8th, by 12 o'clock, or excuse me, 11:59 p.m., then the listing becomes an expired listing. Or in between the time of expiration, the seller and the agent don't see eye to eye, and ultimately it can also cancel as well, right? But is this set in stone, the expiration date? No, okay? You can always modify any of the information here. This is why there's a lot of blanks on here, okay? You can modify the date of start and the date of expiration. You may be involved in the listing already 2 months in, and you may have to modify this because now they're going on vacation for 2 months. And then you have to put a hold on it and maybe extend it, okay? Obviously, the address is important, the zip code, the county, and then the APN number. This is very vital and very important. This is like the social security to your personal. This is the social security of the subject property. You want to make sure that the APN number is in alignment with the address, okay? Because we've seen issues and liability concerns when someone is not paying attention to the APN number and something happens where property ends up being included. And that's exactly what happened many years with a seller that had a separate parcel vacant land that they did not want to sell, but somehow the escrow and the title missed it, and they incorporated that APN with the single family home. So the buyer ultimately got not just the real estate, but they also got a piece of vacant land, which the seller did not want to sell. And the way it all kind of came up was the taxes came up and the buyer got the taxes on it. And the buyer says, well, what is this? So they did a little bit of research. They realized that they also own that piece of land. And that was about a 5,000 square lot piece of land that the seller did not want to sell. It was adjacent to the property, but that was separate APN number. Somehow it was merged with a single family home. And then the deal closed 4 or 5 months later. They got this tax bill. Buyers didn't know, the sellers that they owned the property. And ultimately now that the buyer owned that, the seller thought, okay, can you just grant it over? Can you quick claim it to us? And the buyer said, no, it's my property. Even though that property was worth about $200,000 to $300,000. Because it was a zone for residential. Think about that. $200,000 to $300,000. And the buyer says, no, that's my property. You want it? You're gonna have to pay me. Yeah, which the buyer never paid. So it opened up a can of worms. We ended up going to litigation. We were back and forth and we couldn't come to an agreement, you know. Shame on the buyer, shame on the process, shame on everyone, right? And the listing agent had no fault because the listing agent did put on the agreement that only the residential real estate was going to be sold, not the parcel or the vacant land. So the agent was out of it. Thank goodness. Somehow the escrow and title realized, well, it's the same owner. It's right there because it's adjacent to it. It's incorporated with the sale. And everyone dropped the ball on that. So ultimately, the buyer ended up getting a free piece of land. So the outcome, eventually they settled, they were able to transfer that back to the seller, but it at a cost. At a cost, unfortunately, and that's really not what we want to see, but in reality, that's exactly what happened. Okay, so be very careful, the importance of the APN number. Obviously, as soon as you put in a price, it'll ultimately put in the words, so I put this as an example, 969 as an example, then it comes up to 969,000, right? Now, this is where it gets a little bit confusing for a lot of people, is the listing terms, okay? So the listing terms is any additional terms regarding your position as the agent of choice. What other terms are you going to be including, okay? Are you going to include staging as an example, right? Are you going to do anything above what the agreement already stipulates, right? That's where you're going to put additional terms. And they give you 2 lines to do so, okay? Now let's get into the compensation aspect of it, which is number 3, right? Is that all real estate commissions are what? Negotiable. They're set by each broker and sellers. It's not fixed, okay? So what does that mean to all of us in this room in Anunzu? What does that mean? Anyone?
At 225, can become.
Everything's negotiable.
Thank you. What was your question?
I'm saying 225, for example, can become more of that.
Exactly. Everything is negotiable. So meaning is, as long as the seller, the agent, and the company are in agreement and alignment, you can charge whatever you want. Now, the standard that we've been hearing for years since I started real estate has always been what? 6%. Yeah. That's always been the standard. How that came? Beyond me. Maybe I should Google and find out, how did agents come to that 6% agreement, right? But it does say here that the rate of real estate commission is not fixed by law. They are set by each broker individually and may be negotiable. What does that mean individually? Meaning you can set that parameter, what that looks like. That's all it means. So if you want to charge 10%, guess what? You can. You want to charge 8%, you can. You can also charge less than 6%, you can. Now, I want to caution you, and this is just a disclosure. We as a Keller Williams is not a discount brokerage, okay? What does that mean? Well, you just said, Simon, everything is negotiable when it comes to the commissions, yeah, but there's also a standard that policy and procedures that each real estate company can have amongst their agents, right? And the brokerage has a standard of what that looks like. Does that make sense? Okay, remember, you're not an employee, you're an independent contractor under the umbrella of Keller Williams. And Keller Williams can set that. Now, who owns this listing? Who owns the listing? If you have a listing in place executed by the seller, who owns the listing?
The broker.
Yes, okay, good answer, yeah. At the end of the day, the brokerage owns the listing. The owner owns the real estate, but the brokerage owns the listing. Well, wait a minute, Simon. I put in my time, effort, and energy. I'm the one that went to the appointment. I was the one that did all the work. And you're saying that the brokerage owns the listing? The answer is yeah. The agent only has interest on this. Okay, and I'm going to show you a paragraph that the brokerage within 5 days can decide to either give you the listing or not approve the listing. Because there's certain standards that the brokerage has, which is, again, discounted brokerage, right? Because we don't want to be portrayed as a discount brokerage. And the reason I want to emphasize, and I have a passion for it, because you are worth a lot of money in my opinion, okay? So you should be earning a full commission, right? If that full commission is 5%, if that full commission is 6%, right? But at the end, it's about playing the game, knowing and understanding how to ultimately get, your commission. All right? Any questions so far?
How do you negotiate that? So if the seller comes in and says, give me a discount.
Yeah, I'm already giving you a discount. I'm already giving you a discount. This is my discount to you. Okay, are you ready to sign this agreement today? Right? We'll talk about objections in a little bit, okay? Because that's a very good question. How do we handle objections, right? What did I say earlier? Price, terms, and conditions are mostly your objections, right? And I want to teach you a way to understand and feel comfortable in your position, because you're definitely should be earning top dollars as a professional. And you got to have that right mindset as well to treat yourself like a top professional. Never undercut yourself, and never undercut your value, because you are worth a lot of money. And you'll see, because there's a lot of things that play out that ultimately pays you for services rendered. There's a lot of dynamics that involve, right? The up, the down, the inspections, the contracts, the escrows, the title, the appraisals, a lot of moving parts, requests for repairs. So this is why you're paid well to do services, right? You're the expert. Treat yourself as a professional and you'll see the end results, okay? Now, just below that, you can also put a flat fee, okay? Instead of percentage, you can say, look, I'm just gonna do it for a flat fee for $10,000, okay? That's why they have this information here where you can put optional, a percentage or a flat fee. I'd rather go the percentage. Why is that? Yeah, because it's based on the listing price and ultimately what the buyer gets, right? I mean, what the seller gets at the end, right? So everyone should be going for the percentage instead of the flat fee. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Section A, 3A, where it says add. This is where you can pay yourself. This is where you can add additional questions regarding who is responsible of paying any additional fees. You're already getting a 5 total commission, okay? So here, do not put yourself, if you're getting 2.5 or 3%, just 3%. This is where you're going to put the total commission coming into the market center or to the brokerage, okay? If you get a 6%, that's where 6% is going to go, okay? Not your 2%, not your 2.5%, not your 3%. Total commission, okay? Because if the seller's savvy and you put 2.5%, that's the total commission. That means that if you negotiate it with another brokerage or a broker or agent, then you're cutting yourself short of commission. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Transaction coordination fee. So I put here that, the seller would be responsible of paying a total 5%, but the seller would also be responsible to pay the TC fee. Has anyone thought creatively here in how you can avoid paying the TC fee? Here's an example. Add it on the contract, and if the seller signs it, congratulations, the seller will have to pay it through the escrow process.
You do have
Because-
to tell them, right?
Huh?
Tell them.
Well, it's in writing. They're gonna have to initial this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the seller in this case would be okay with it. Well, Simon, I'm already paying you a 5%, yeah. But this additional transaction, which you get a copy of the entire file, that's an additional expense. Again, how do you handle objections, right? People would be, ew, this is something that the agent has to pay. No. The seller can pay those expenses. That's what the seller can pay. The seller can pay your marketing as well. Seller can pay your staging. You got the staging, $10,000, but the seller's gonna pay for that. On top, already paying you a commission. Because the commission is not guaranteed. The commission is not guaranteed. What does that mean? You can get a listing, right? But you over listed the property, you don't get no hits on it, property becomes an expired. you're not gonna get a commission. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay? Any questions regarding section 3A here as follows? All right, the next section that I want you to pay very close attention to is section 3(2), where it says 120. Never, never, never leave it blank. Okay, why? Okay. Go ahead.
Because it needs a data of how long the listing is, or it needs an extension.
Yes and no. So you're in the right direction, but it's not the correct answer. So the reason you want to put a number here is if you read the paragraph, it says, if within 120 calendar days after the end of the listing period or extension, or after cancellation of this agreement, unless otherwise agreed, seller enters into contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property to anyone else. Prospective buyer or the person related entity who physically entered and was shown the property during the listing period of any extension by the broker or a cooperating broker, meaning you or any buyer's agent, for whom broker or any cooperating broker submitted to the seller a signed written offer to inquire, lease, exchange, or obtain an option on the property. We were talking about options recently too. Okay. So what does that mean? What it means, folks, okay, and it's a very simple disclaimer. Because we don't want sellers to take your commission, right? For example, you have a listing for 6 months, right? 6 months. And there's a neighbor that goes to the seller and says, hey, John, I realized that you put your property on the market. My brother has been wanting to live in the same neighborhood that I've lived here for 5 years. Let me present this client so we can work a deal, right? Well, the seller, right? The seller is going to know, well, shoot, this is not something that the agent brought to the table. This is something that the buyer, or excuse me, that the neighbor brought to the seller. So the seller's thinking, how can I maneuver through this and not pay a full commission of 5%, where I already have a ready, willing, and able buyer that wants to buy my property? So they may try to under you and try to work a deal. Okay. Be careful. This is the reason this language is very important, because now it protects the listing agent in the future if this buyer ever buys this property. Now you can go after monetary damages because the seller breached the contract. Okay. If you leave this blank, ladies and gentlemen, there's no recourse. Once it cancels, it cancels. Now there's one other step that needs to be included as part of this this language, right? And it says that anytime the listing is planning to expire or cancel, you must provide the seller with an exclusion list of anyone that has seen the property and submitted an offer. Seen and submitted an offer. It says right there, a prospective buyer, right? Anyone that's a related entity who has physically entered and was shown the property during the listing period or extension, right? For whom the broker or any cooperating broker submitted to the seller a signed written offer to inquire, lease, and exchange to obtain an option, and the seller, however, shall have no obligation to broker under paragraph 3A2 unless not later than the end of the listing period or any extension of the cancellation. Broker has given the seller written notice of the names of such prospective buyers. Now we can go after a commission because we have this in here. Now, 120 days is something that I was taught many years. How many days and, excuse me, how many months is 120? 4 months, right? Yeah. You can put 6 months, you can put a year, you can put 30 days. But remember, one number you put, that's the number that starts after it expires or cancels the listing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so section C talks about any additional seller agrees to pay broker, right? Anything else that you think that is an agreement upon you and the principal seller, okay? Now, section D talks about the compensation to cooperating brokerage, all right? Remember, you're gonna put the full commission on the very top, and then you're gonna put the cooperating compensation that you're willing to pay a consumer, excuse me, not a consumer, but an agent, right? Okay, that's where section, no, where am I at? That's where section D comes in. Seller has been advised broker's policy, right? What did I say earlier about the policy procedure, right? That we're not a discount brokerage, right? So if there's standards here, doesn't mean that you can go and say, I'm gonna list your property for 1%. Now, I'll take this into consideration, all right? If you happen to come across a scenario where you're going to lose the opportunity because there's multiple agents, this is why knowing skill sets, your value proposition, but more so how to handle those objections of your value, then you shouldn't be in that position of discounting your brokerage. But there's times, and I get it, there's times that you have to bend a little bit to make this work. And you may say, I'm very prideful, I'm only going after 5. If the seller doesn't want to give me the listing at 5%, I don't want it, okay? And there's agents that are like that, and that's perfectly fine. But look at the bigger picture, right? Because there's opportunities with just securing a listing. What are those opportunities that you may get out of listing a property? Anyone? More business, absolutely, yeah. You put your sign up, you put it on the MLS, you're gonna get hits on it, you're gonna get views on it, you're gonna get people looking at this property. What if you pick up a buyer from it? What if you pick up a seller from it? What if someone is walking or driving the neighborhood and sees your sign for sale and they say, hey, that Simon's, let me call him, I'm interested. And that's where you make the difference of your commission, right? What if you're doing an open house and the neighbor comes in and says, you know what, we've been thinking about selling our home, right? There's an opportunity. That's where you can make the difference as well. Okay, so don't always think that getting a lower commission is not a benefit. It also can be a benefit for you. Now, before you go in that direction, please make sure to reach out to the team leader and ask that you're going to do this, right? Because we don't want to just see, you know, because we get the calls, we get the complaints. I thought Keller Williams is not a discount brokerage. And we get those quite often because we really are not. Okay. And sometimes we have to even give a little more to the cooperating broker than we do for ourselves. If you're going to go down to say 4%, right? Now, what did I say earlier about that commissions are all negotiable, right? They're not set by law. It's between you and the principal, right? Make sense? Any questions? Katrina, any questions? Okay. All right, so here it goes into section D1, brokers authorized to cooperate with the compensation broker participating through the multiple listing service, which is the MLS, by offering the MLS brokers out brokers compensation specified in paragraph 3A, either, and then it's either percentage or a flat fee. Percentage or flat fee, okay? Now, I've seen in the past, okay, where agents on the MLS will state that if you're not a member of the MLS, that you're not entitled to a commission. Has anyone seen that in the past? Yeah. Yeah. That's against the rules and regulations. That's a violation. Just because you're not a member doesn't necessarily mean you're not entitled to a commission. There's a lot of commercial agents that are not members of the MLS. They're members of other organizations such as CoStar, LoopNet. But you cannot emphasize and put that as part of a stipulation that you cannot get paid a commission if you represent the buyer on a property that's on the MLS. And the agent cannot tell you, well, I'm not going to pay you a commission if you're not a subscribed member of the MLS. Agents used to do that. And guess what? Agents would get in violations because of that. Okay. So that was something that was a constant conversation. Broker is authorized to cooperate with the compensation broker operates outside of the MLS as per broker policy. There you go. Okay. Seller hereby assigns to broker the above compensations and seller's funds and proceeds in escrow. Broker may submit this agreement as instructions to compensation broker pursuant to paragraph 38 to any escrow regarding the property involved, seller and buyer, prospective buyer, or other transferee. Seller represents that the seller has not previously entered into a listing agreement with any other brokerage regarding the property. If so, seller to provide the name of the brokerage and agents of the name. This is more such as when you're calling expired listings, right? How many times have you called and you get a seller that is interested in selling their property? Now, the reason you want to protect yourself is because what if that previous, right? The previous agent has a disclaimer in there that says, I'm going to, after expiration or cancellation, have 6 months if any of the buyers come back and buy this property. And you get the new listing, right? You want to set the tone, you want to set the parameter, because what if that happens? You get the listing, right? You're a good negotiator, and you realize that the previous agent listed the property way too high. And you go in here and show variable comps, and these comps show that the listing should have been at this instead of that, right? So in essence, when you're going on a listing appointment, folks, you got to be crystal clear and explain, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know that this is an expired listing. What was the name and the brokerage that was involved? And you put the information there. Okay, or the name of the agent that was involved. Like I said here, if so, seller to provide the name of the brokerage and the agent involved. Why? Because we don't want to have the seller pay a double commission. Okay, because the agent may say a procuring cost. I had already put in part of the agreement, and here's the list of buyers. And because you listed the property for a lot less, I'm going after the seller for additional commission. Okay. At that point in time, everything is negotiable, right? Because you're saying, well, shoot, I put all this time, effort, and energy. Now I'm going to lose an opportunity to earn a commission because this buyer now came back with their agent to submit an offer. We open escrow. Well, it's negotiated. Okay. What you can do, and I've seen this happen, is look, I know you had an agreement with the seller. I'm willing to pay you on a referral. You can work. Now, depending on how aggressive the agent and the brokerage, because it is really detailed that they're entitled to a full commission, right? Are you going to try to kill the deal, or the seller kill the deal because the seller says, no, I'm not going to pay that other agent that gave me bad service, right? It's a working relationship. It's all negotiating, right? Because they may come after and says, well, we're entitled to the 2% or 3% that the seller agreed to. Yeah, I get it. But you're not going to compromise someone else's position because they did a better job. Now they're in escrow and they put time, effort, and energy, right? It's a negotiating tool, and if it escalates, obviously you want to bring the broker involved so we can navigate. We may have to go to mediation. We may have to go to arbitration, but that is between the previous agent, agency, and seller. Okay, not about you and your agreement with the seller. But it may come across, and you may have to deal with that as well. Does that make sense? Any questions regarding that? Okay. Seller warrants that the seller has no obligation to pay compensation to any other broker regarding the property unless property is transferred to any of the following individuals or entities, okay? So again, really clear, concise on what that means, right? If the property is sold to anyone listed above during the time, seller is obligated to compensate the other broker. Broker is not entitled to compensation under this agreement. And two, broker is not obligated to represent the seller in such a transaction. Okay, if that happens, you can say, look, I understand, you deal with it. Okay, that's exactly what the agreement says. All right, section 4 talks about items included and not included on the property unless otherwise specified in the purchase agreement, all fixtures. What does that mean? It means that the buyer can submit an offer, right? And the offer may be that the buyer may want specific personal items. What can be personal items that the buyer may want as part of the deal? Anyone?
Appliances.
Appliances, okay, correct. What else?
Like a painting.
Paintings, yeah. What else? Furniture?
Yeah.
I've done a transaction where the buyer submitted an all cash offer, but they also said, I'm buying this property with all the furniture, everything included. Just take your personal stuff. And the seller agreed to it because the seller was going to buy new appliances, new stuff. They left everything, their master bedroom stuff, all the appliances, the tables, the sofas, the televisions, the washer and dryer, the daughter's furniture, all was left because the seller had a beautiful home and it looked like it was staged. So they wanted the property as is. They didn't want to touch anything. We'll buy it, but this is the condition that we'll buy it as. And the seller agreed. As long as the seller and the buyer come to an agreement, everything is negotiable, right, Katrina? Yeah. Yeah, everything is very negotiable. Okay. Now, again, when you're going on a listing appointment and you know you're 100% that you're going to get the listing, then you want to know what is staying and what is not staying with the property, right? Because you don't want to be that agent that ultimately did not divulge that, and now the buyer assumes that was incorporated as part of the agreement, and that's a dispute in itself. Okay, the seller takes it out, and the buyer was like, I thought that was part of the agreement, and now you have a dispute, and that happens. So put those parameters in place right from the very beginning. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what is staying, what is not staying with the property? So I know how to navigate that and be crystal clear with the buyer's agent that this is not incorporated or not part of the sale. Okay. All personal items at seller's discretion, all appliances to remain with the property. And maybe the seller says, look, I want to leave everything, right? I want to leave all the appliances, the microwave, this, the stove, refrigerator, whatever the case, washer and dryer. Put it all in writing. So there's no misunderstanding. And in this industry, that happens quite often. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have issues with the buyers. And they have cameras, they have the camera by the door or all around the house, and they say, are they included? And I look at the contract, it doesn't say if the space, or included or excluded. I said, let me ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Put it in the contract. That way you know. And then it's like if you have like an electric vehicle too, right? Most consumers nowadays that have electric vehicles usually have a system that they connect their vehicles to, right? Is that going to stay with the property or is that going to be taken? That's something that you want to know, right? From the very beginning. If you're representing the seller, well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know you have this beautiful electric vehicle. Is that going to stay or are you planning to take that as part of your personal lives? Now, you got to weigh it out. Is a battery charger personal or part of the real estate?
Is it a physical property? Yeah, sometimes they are.
I'm asking you this question.
I would say it's objectable to that.
I'm asking this question. I don't know. I'm asking. Is that considered real property or personal property?
It sticks to the problem.
But we can have an argument over this, saying it is personal. No, it's real property. It's attached. You can't move it, right? It really depends on the situation. Was that part of the original build of the house, right? That's the question, right? Because you can say a water softener is built into the property, that stays with the property, right? You gotta know, this is why you gotta ask those questions from the very beginning, so there is no misunderstanding, no room for interpretation, right? If the seller's intention is to not have it part of the deal, then I would say either move it before the property goes live, or we put that in writing that that is not going to be part of the agreement. You know, and that's fine. Yes, Katrina.
And that's something for listing agents when they do marketing that they have to be cognizant of. For example, if you have in your description that this property has this EV charging station, and then all of a sudden during escrow, the seller wants to take it, well, you can go back to the listing and say you advertise this property with this. And there, I actually got a couple listing agents on that, said, nope, you advertised that this was a part of the price and can't take it out. So listing agents have to be cognizant of what they put in their property descriptions.
Yeah, you gotta be very careful. Do agents make errors? Well, let me take that back. Does individuals make errors? Everyone makes errors, right?
Yeah.
Now, to follow up to Katrina's point is, if the agent didn't ask a lot of questions, right? And the agent did put that it was part of it, but the seller intentions was not to, right? That can open up an opportunity that the agent, the buyer's agent may say, well, I understand the seller's not going to, you may have to come up with the difference to pay for that. It comes out of your commission. And I've seen agents bite the bullet because they made a mistake. And then the mistake is their commission. So be very, very careful on how you approach this, because the seller says, I never told you I was going to have that part of the sale. I told you. And sometimes you hear so many things, you may accidentally forget to put that as part of the agreement. Make sense? All right. Any questions regarding 4A? Okay, 4B talks about lease and own items such as solar panels, alarm systems, propane, water softeners. Okay, you want to make sure that when you're doing your actual physical view of the property, right? You're asking questions. I noticed that it has solar panels. I noticed that it has the electrical cable to charge a vehicle. I see that it's a water softener. These are questions that you need to address at the time. That way there's no avenue of misinterpretation, right? Because again, what if these items are leased? Okay, and the buyer wants these free and clear. And the seller says, look, I was going to leave it, and the buyer's responsible to that, right? So you got to be very careful in how you approach this, ask questions. That's why this is now an item listing, part of the listing agreement. Okay. Now we're going into the multiple listing service, right? The importance of why you want to put it on the multiple listings. Now, section C says, what is broker MLS? Broker is a participant subscriber. So if you're planning to put it in multiple syndications or MLSs, emphasize there, right? As an example, CRMLS. If you're part of CLAW, right, you're going to put it on CLAW. If you're part of CoStar, you're going to put it in CoStar. If you're part of Realtor.com, whatever, you know, put all of the multiple services that you're going to be inputting that listing to. So that way there's clear, concise understanding of the seller and the agent's position. Then it just talks about the clear cooperation, you know, the benefits of putting it on the MLS. Then it goes on to the public marketing and the clear cooperation policy. MLS requires, do not require residential real estate within 1 or 4 units. They can allow listings to be submitted in the MLS within 1 business days of public marketing. So I want to be very clear because this is where a lot of agents get themselves in a pickle. They get themselves in trouble. Because they'll get a listing and they'll put it in their pocket, right? Have you heard pocket listings, right? Well, it's a no-no because we see a lot of agents, do deals off market, never put it on the MLS. And therefore, is the seller getting the best views of the property, right? Because when you are doing a deal off market, you're not exposing the property to thousands of consumers, right? So are you really looking at your client's best interest, or are you looking at to make a quick, fast commission, right? This is why the clear cooperating policy came into effect, that as soon as you get a listing agreement in place, that you immediately put it in the MLS. That's all it said. You get a listing, you have it signed by the seller, you're immediately gonna input it into the MLS, okay? Now, the MLS has now different criterias, right? Coming soon, right, is one of them. And that coming soon doesn't impact your days on market in the cumulative days on market. The coming soon allows you 21 days. By the 22nd day, now it becomes an active listing. Okay, so it gives you a perspective of what they call pocket listings without impacting days on market. Does that make sense? All right, some see it as a benefit, some say, no, I don't see that as a benefit because I want to procure a buyer. Usually when you do off market is because the agent already has a potential buyer that they can put that buyer with the seller and make a full fat commission of 5 or 6%. That's why they do it. This is why this was implemented to protect the consumer, the sellers, from agents doing that. Hustle and bustle under the radar of the MLS. Public marketing with the clear cooperating includes but not limited to flyers. So what it says is, if you're going to get a listing in the off market, you have to disclose it, but you cannot promote it. That's what it says. Any flyers or any syndication, third-party sites, because that's considered a violation. Okay, and you got to be very careful because the MLS has patrol officers within the MLS, enforcers, what they call them. And they're constantly navigating and looking at third-party sites. And if they see that there is a property that is there, but it's not on the MLS, they do a lot of research. And if you're a member of the association, a member of MLS, then they could send you a fat bill saying, hey, you're in violation. And if you don't take care of that and put it on the MLS, then you're going to be paying a fat fine, right? And no one likes to pay tickets, right, or fines, because that's how they treat us now. I feel like they're similar to the no, not even that. They're cool people. Who I really agitated is the Los Angeles parking enforcement. Those guys are notorious. If you don't have a front license plate, they give you a ticket. If your wheels are turned a certain angle, they give you a ticket. It's like, what the heck? So it's the Los Angeles parking enforcement that I kind of see the MLS. So. All right, any questions? Now, it also talks about coming soon status impact the marketing days on market. So what it says is a disclaimer, folks, that if you do get a listing and you put it as a coming soon, it doesn't impact your days on market because every agent is very particular in their position, right? I don't want it to impact days on market or cumulative days on market because there's two. There's days on market and cumulative days on market. Now, the differences between those two is that the days on market is as soon as you put it active on the MLS, it starts, right? If you put it on hold, that stops the days on market. But what doesn't stop is the cumulative days on market. And I've seen some agents also be a little tricky. I'm going to cancel it, wait 24 hours, put it back on the market and put it, and it'll show it as 0 days on market. Well, the MLS have gone smart, and now there's a button that the agency is, something is fishy about this, that you can send out a violation request for the MLS to investigate. And I just did that last week, where a property in Redondo Beach was listed for 1.4. I got wind of it from another agent says, hey, this property came out 0.0. How did they do that? And I said, well, I don't know. That's kind of strange. So I investigated the MLS and I noticed you're right. It got canceled 2 days prior and it had like 120 days on market. How is it that this agent was able to cancel it, wait 2 days, put it back, and it's 0-0? So I was curious, as I need to know that secret so I can teach my agents. Well, I called the MLS and I spoke with their compliance department. They investigated, they said, no, that's not correct. There was a glitch in the system. Yeah, there is a glitch, right? That's what they told me. So I says, you know what, tell me how this works so I know how to teach my agents how to do this. Because you cannot just cancel and then think that it's gonna come up as a, and I get it, the benefits of a property that goes stale, right? For 6 months, 4 months, goes stale. You wanna reboost that MLS, come up as a fresh listing. I get it. But that's not the proper way of doing it. In order for this to happen, to be 0-0, it has to be officially canceled by the agent and the seller, and you have to wait how many days? How many days afterward now shows 0-0? No one knows? I don't know.
90.
Yes, it's actually 91 days. 3 months, unfortunately. You gotta wait 91 days before it becomes an official. Because even if you get the cancellation and another brokerage picks it up, then the cumulative days on market will still show, unfortunately. Yeah, it sucks, but that's reality. If it's the same seller in the same listing, even if it's a different brokerage, it still will show 0 days, but I believe it also shows the cumulative days on market. It doesn't change that. Okay, so keep that in mind when having a listing. And I have to verify because I think they might have changed it, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, any questions on coming soon? Section D talks about seller's instruction of MLS requires. If you are going to not put it on the MLS, then what it says that you're going to create a SELM. SELM. What does that stand for? Seller excludes the listing from the market. That's what it stands for. Seller excludes listing from the MLS. You need to provide that form, send it to the MLS. Now you're in compliance that the property will not be marketed for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months. You have the listing, but the listing will not go live on the MLS. Okay. All right, I'm going to cut it short because all this stuff is mumbo jumbo. Seller's representation, meaning, what is the seller's responsibility? Brokers and sellers' responsibility. Presenting of offers. So this is where I get a lot of agents getting a little confused, okay? And this is where I want to make sure that we're crystal clear. Presenting of offers. Broker agrees to present all offers received for seller property and present them to the seller as soon as possible unless seller gives written instructions, okay? So what it says is, and if you have to leave, because I know we're going over time, folks, by all means, please, no worries. I know you've had a long day.
No, we
Okay.
have to pick up our kids from school.
I understand. I understand that. So what this means, thank you. What this means is basically is that any offers that come in, you have to present them to the seller, even if you're in escrow. Okay, so even if you're in escrow and someone says, look, just throw the dice, submit an offer and see what happens. That's what it says. Well, you think, well, Simon, the property is in escrow. Why would someone submit an offer? Well, the listing agreement says otherwise. It says that any offers that come in, you must present to the seller, as long as you don't have something in writing. If you have something in writing that says otherwise, then by all means, you don't have to entertain. But if you don't have something in writing, any offers that should come in, even during escrow, you got to present to the seller. Interesting, right? Yes, sir.
Is there a form
There is no form. It's just something in writing. Yeah. The seller says, look, once we open escrow, okay, once we open escrow, I don't care if it's $1 million offer, more than what I listed. I don't want to entertain it. As long as you have it in writing, then you can instruct any buyer or not even present, even if they don't call you, they just submit an offer. You don't have to entertain because you got the written instructions from the seller. Okay. Most agents don't do that. And most will probably not get any offers during escrow because once it goes pending or under contract, you're not going to see any offers come in. But what it says is even if you're in escrow. So if you see properties that are in escrow, okay, just as a caution, if you see properties and this was a property that your client wanted, what it says is you can still submit an offer. And that has to be presented to the seller. Because you don't know if this deal is going through or not, right? Most agents will do the common courtesy, right? Call, hey, I know you're in escrow. How's that looking? Well, they're gonna tell you, well, it looks good. Buyers have released or will be releasing all contingencies, right? Once the buyer releases all contingencies, then it's pretty common that the deal may be closing, right? But what it says is that the buyer and the buyer agent can present an offer. That's exactly what it says. Interesting, right? Buyer's supplemental offer letters, buyer's letters. So for a while, remember during the boom, buyers agents and their clients were submitting an offer, but they were also sending a letter, right? A nice little letter with the picture of the family and the dog, right? Well, that was the common practice, right? Submit an offer, kind of get and tell the story of the buyer, right? So agents were submitting, pre-approvals, DUs, credit scores, proof of funds, purchase agreements. So you were getting like a stack of paper, right? Without being accepted, but you were getting so many paper. And part of it was these love letters, what we call, right? Letters that included with it, and it was perfectly fine to do so. Then not the DR, but the CAR, California Association of Realtors, and their attorneys all got together that, it's influencing the seller's decision when they see these type of letters. So no more love letters, no more letters to be attached with the offers. Just stay to the facts of the offer and the purchase agreements. That's what it stipulates. So then everyone stops sending love letters. Now, what the agreement says is the seller has the option. The seller has the option to say to the agent, says, yeah, look, I don't want any letters included as part of the agreement, or I'm okay. Please include the letters. I'm fine with it. So that's what this new language that stipulates about sellers instruction broker to present offers, whether submitted with the offer separately as a different time, seller authorized broker to specify in the MLS that the buyer's letter will not be presented to the seller. Seller instructs broker to present buyer's letters if checked. So if you uncheck that, then you're saying seller does not want any letters. But if you check it is, seller's fine to have letters. Interesting, right? Okay, and then 6 months from now, they're probably going to take this out again. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right, section D, seller agrees to consider offers presented by broker and to act in good faith to accomplish the sale of the property. Remember, everything that we do is in good faith, right? The intentions of everything, your intentions to list the property, the seller's intentions to sell the property, the buyer's intentions to submit an offer, and the buyer to go and close the deals because the intention is to buy the property, right? So it's putting all this in perspective. The importance of accomplishing the goal is to make the property accessible to the buyer and not interfering with the process. Because once you list the property, you're telling the listing agent, you're telling the buyer's agent, and you're telling the buyer, look, I'm exposing the property for you to do anything you want regarding the process, right? View the property, submit an offer, do physical inspections, do multiple inspections, right? And then come to a conclusion. Do you want to continue moving forward or do you not want to? Is it getting a little cold in here?
Yeah.
That's to keep you up, guys. That's my intention. That's my intention, keep you up. Some people, I unfortunately can't help that, all right? I wish I had an AC button that keeps everyone cold. All right, so any questions regarding that? Section E talks about investigation and report. Seller agrees within 5 days of beginning date of the agreement in order required by servicing provider. So basically what it says is if you get a listing involved, right? What it is that the seller has the right. The seller has the right to do pre-inspections, termite, home inspections, whatever the seller wants, you can do it as part of the condition before they even put the property on the market. Why is this a benefit? Why would a seller do this?
So they know what they get.
Yeah, to basically see the ins and outs. What if this was an investment property that the seller has not lived in the property? Tenants have vacated, now they want to know exactly what the condition of the home is, right? They can get a independent home inspection done. That home inspection says, hey, roof is kind of bad. Hey, the plumbing. So now the seller knows exactly what they need to do, and they may be proactive, right? And want to fix it before they put it on the market or sell it as is too. They don't care. Yes, sir.
Was that if the sellers did do a home inspection or termite or anything, does that become part of the disclosures?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Even
absolutely.
though they pay for it privately on their own even before we took the listing?
Yeah.
Is that considered common knowledge and we have to share that with?
100%. Yeah, Chris. Anything that is relatable to the property that is done to the property, then it's considered material facts now. You have to provide that as part of the condition now. That's so if they did a home inspection, then guess what? That's going to be now part of the seller's disclosures is the home inspection. Why would this be a benefit to the seller? Because if the buyer goes in there, does their inspections, but something that they miss, right? And now a previous inspection done by the seller says, well, this was what we found. And the buyer buys the property, closes and realize, hey, well, you know what, somehow, some way the seller, or excuse me, the buyer found out that there was an independent inspection done. Now it could put liability on the seller for non-disclosure.
So it's still a good idea for the buyer to have their own home inspection, even though the seller did their own.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. You're just providing that as part of the disclosure. You're not even telling the buyer or the buyer's agent, hey, don't have to do an inspection. You know, we already provided, it was done 2 weeks. No, you never do that. You provide that as part of disclosures. The buyer still needs to do an independent investigation because again, remember, this is something that was done by the seller, not by the buyer, folks. Okay, so you're providing this list of reports as part of seller disclosures, but you will never say, you know, you don't have to buyer, even if you represent a buyer, I would still tell the buyer, you know, if I was the listing agent, you know, we have a report here, but I encourage you to please get an independent home inspection. Here are 3 home inspection companies that I choose to. Well, Simon, you already have an inspection. Why do I need to spend another $300-400? I get it, but this was the seller. What if you get your independent and this person finds new stuff regarding the property that this report doesn't have, but this one does? Remember, that's part of your negotiation, and that protects you from saying, well, you gave me this report, but then, you know, I didn't know I had an option to get another independent inspection. And that's the fine line, folks, that people can sue the crap out of, you know, the sellers and all that. Yes, sir.
That's why sometimes you get somebody who's cheap and says, well, I want to just use the buyer's inspection, say, okay, you have to sign a waiver of responsibility for both brokers. Because you have to even protect the listing agent too, because if this buyer chooses to go outside the box, or the buyer chooses to go outside the box and not obtain a second, because it's, first of all, the inspector doesn't ensure the home inspection. But I have had cases before where there's been a previous home inspection and the inspector, he calls the home inspector and the inspector says, could you put it in my name and insure it? That's when it's okay, because he charges the buyer like half of the normal inspection would cost, and he comes back out and he does just a walkthrough with the buyer, and then he puts it in his name. So the buyer is actually paying a little bit less because the inspection was already done. He's doing a re-inspection, but he's putting in his name. So all the liability is on the buyer and the inspection.
Correct. Yeah.
That's on hold, that listing.
Yeah, I'm going to work on it right now. Thanks. Okay.
Good luck, guys.
14, thanks, Jim. 14 photographs and internet. So basically, is the seller allowing you to promote it and do professional photography? Obviously, any seller would use common sense that, yeah, it's a benefit to the seller to, you know, expose it and show the light of the property, because people love seeing photos, right? Of the interior, exterior of the property. So by taking professional photography, drone footage of that, or even like what do they call it? A virtual tour is a benefit. Remember back in 2020 when pandemic was at the highest, right? and we were still selling properties, right? But we were doing these virtual tours where you can actually see from every part of the house inside. That's what it says. If the seller agrees, then you don't uncheck it. If they don't agree to it, then you push this check mark here, and then you don't disclose that. 15 talks about the safety lockbox. Is the property going to have a lockbox, a combo? So it just goes into, if it is, then you don't touch it. If it doesn't, then you're going to check it. Yes, sir.
Just real quick, if the seller doesn't want any photograph, the MLS rules are still, we have to have, is it 1 or 2 within 24 or 48 hours on the listing?
A photo?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question, Chris. So the question is, to be in compliance, all you need is one photo of the front of the house. That's it. It cannot be a picture of the local community or Disney, now if the property is near Anaheim. It has to be of the subject property front of the house. Okay,
It has to be within 48 hours of you putting it on the MLS.
that's correct.
Okay,
That's
otherwise you get fined, right?
That's correct. Yep. Good point. All right, signs, if you're going to put some signs on it, if the property is going to be tenant occupied, if it's an investment, is the property being sold with a tenant or without a tenant? And it talks about that. Seller, are you including a for sale sign, a post, stuff of that nature? And then obviously attorney fees, additional terms, if there's anything, if the property is an REO, short sales, trust advisory. Or you can put additional information. Here's an example of what I kind of wrote, 1, professional photography, aerial footage to be included. And then here, Redfin valued, and again, just as an example, because the consumer, the sellers are going to see what they see. I just want to put in perspective of what I would have put. Value was 1.1, Zillow 951 was Realtors.com 1,100,000, 21 days after adding to the MLS with no offer. Seller shall consider a possible price adjustment. Minimum time for showing is 4 hours in advance per seller's request. Seller shall provide copies of HOA, CCNRs, and bylaws. Again, all you're doing is just putting clear, concise understanding so that way you and the seller are on the same page. Does that make sense? And this may be a little over the top, but I'd rather disclose, provide, so there's no interpretation of misunderstanding, right? Because now we can always go back, because I can't remember what I did yesterday, let alone 2-3 months. I'll be honest with you. But what you can do is go back to the contract and know exactly what was done. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
I see that you have specific terms. Have you ever sued the seller for not complying with those things? Like a 4-hour window for viewing?
I'm very clear on that. I put that on the MLS. You're talking about the 4-hour window?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I put what the seller wants. Is there room for modifications? Absolutely. And I've been in circumstances, and agents been in circumstances, we want a 4-hour window, but I'll call the agent, right? Or the agent will call and says, hey, I got a possible showing in 2 hours. Are you okay? Yeah, they're okay. And that's perfectly, it's not, anything and everything is not typically set in stone, because you can modify this, because I've been in certain scenarios, agents been in scenarios where they say, give us 4-hour window before any showings, to provide that necessary time to clean the house, get the dogs out, whatever the case may be, right? But in essence, I've seen where, 30 minutes, okay, we're fine, we're out of the house. So again, there's always room for modifications on it. Make sense? Okay. All right, so this is the section that I was talking about, is the manager approval. Remember I said that Keller Williams is not a discount brokerage, right? So what it says is if an associate license, okay, meaning an associate could be a salesperson and a broker associate in broker's office, meaning Keller Williams, salesperson or broker associate enters into this agreement on broker's behalf, right? The Keller Williams broker, and broker or manager does not approve of these terms, broker or manager has the right to cancel this agreement in writing within 5 days of execution. Yeah. Yeah. I want you just to absorb this a little bit, folks, because there it is. Okay? So in essence, you do have control, but you also don't have some control. Because what it says is the management has to approve the listing. If the listing doesn't make sense, we could say, you know, we're not gonna approve it, and we have 5 days from the time of execution to review this. This is why compliance is very important. As soon as you get a listing, within 72 hours, you need to upload it. You need to get a TC, you need to upload it into command. Okay? This is why it's there, because we may not be in agreement to what you're doing. Okay? We don't want to set you up for failure, but if you're putting yourself in a position of liability or concern, we can red flag this and say, look, Simon, this is not bueno, this is no good. We need to gather this agreement, and maybe I can step in as the broker and have a conversation with your sellers. Because maybe you didn't understand the elements of it, right? Price, terms, and conditions, okay? 21 just talks about successors and assignees, that this agreement shall be binding upon seller and seller successors and assigning. Basically, if there is anyone else involved, that everyone is on the same page. 22 talks about disputes and resolutions, mediations, or a possible arbitration. So if there is a dispute between you as the agent and the seller, before it gets escalated, we must do mediation. That's what it says. And if we cannot come to a resolution on the mediation aspect of it, then we can escalate it to an arbitration. Okay. Now, I want to set the tone, and I want to be very clear on this. You know, we never want to get to that level, right? Where there's a dispute. Is there always going to come with some issues? And the answer is yes. Okay. And it's knowing how to navigate your avenue, navigate your approach to ultimately make it a win-win. I don't want you to lose the listing. I don't want the seller to go in a different direction. And sometimes you bring someone else to help you navigate this. Because I've seen firsthand is when you bring someone else, it kind of eases up on the frustration or sometimes the anger that is involved, right? And leadership typically sees things from the outset because they're not in the trenches of the deal. We may just go based on what the contract says, and that's all we talk about. I don't care about all the other chaos and issues you have. I want to get to the bottom of what the core of the agreement is, and that's what I'm going to focus on. You can rampage and say how good, how bad. It doesn't matter to me. What does the contract say? And I'm going to rail that stop. Let's get back to what the agreement says and finish this off. Because I don't want to spend 2 hours nipping something that I could have nipped in 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Okay. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. 23 talks about, you know, any discussions, negotiations, agreements between all parties concerning a subject matter of this agreement are superseded by this agreement. Basically, you know, anything involved, you still relay and go back to what this listing agreement says. Ownership and title, basically that you are the owner, you have the right to sell this property. If it's in a trust or anything or an entity such as a corporation, who are you? Are you the authorized party that has the right and opportunity to sell the property? Okay, and that goes into the legal authorization. Okay, and then the entities of that. Okay. All right. Any questions regarding this? Okay. Boy, everyone is still on Zoom, surprisingly. All right. So again, are listing agreements negotiable?
Yes.
Yeah, they are. Are listing agreements able to modify? Can you modify these agreements?
Yes, you
Yeah,
can.
okay. Now, part of the initial process in the avenue is to understand, because remember, in order for you to lock in that opportunity, you go into a listing appointment, right? You want to make sure that you have the right tools, the right ammunition, right? The listing agreement in place, ready to rock and roll. You know, now you're not going to have all this information added already, but you're going to have a notation ready, right? And that notation is gonna say the elements and the bullet points of what the agreement is between you and between the seller. Because at the end of the presentation, I want you to at least have a concise understanding that you do have the agreement in place, right? And walk away that you do have the listing secured, right? Now, as I was saying earlier, the pros and cons and the position as a professional is, the objections that come with this, right? The objections that you may get from the seller after you finish your presentation. You sit down, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, are you ready to sign this agreement? What if the seller says, no? We need to think about it, okay? How do you handle that objection? After you spend 30 to an hour and sometimes longer doing your presentation, right? Providing them the comparable market analysis and telling them why you are the right choice to sell their home. The seller says, well, we need to think about it. How do you handle that conversation? Right? Or what if the seller says, well, Simon, everything is good, right? Everything looks good, but the commission I'm not comfortable with. I have an agent that I know that can do it for a lot less. You're saying 6%, but I have someone that's willing to do it for 4%, right? How do you handle that objection? Right? Or what if the seller says, look, I have a family member, right? I have a family member that has been in the real estate agent. I wanted to see you first because I know that you know the area, but I think we want to, probably give it to a family member. How do you handle that objection, right? Are you the local expert in the area? How many homes have you sold? When was the last home you sold in this particular neighborhood? How long have you been? Well, your office, right? Your office is too far. I've never heard of Keller Williams, right? How do you handle that objection, right? So what I'm going to do for the sake of time, because I've already, exhausted an hour and 30 minutes, and it should be about an hour. We're going to have a class and just strictly dive deep into these conversations and how to handle objections, what to do, what to say, and ultimately navigate those conversations to make it a win-win. Because I think it's very important as we go through the trenches that we're all on the same page. Everything should be systematic, like a pilot flying a plane. There should be a checklist. And it should always come out the same way. Every listing appointment that you go in should be always the same way, just like a checklist. Because that's going to help you build up momentum, the confidence, but more so the understanding and how to illustrate and explain this to the seller. Now, I went through it for about an hour. I would probably condense that a little bit shorter and, explain what this agreement is with the sellers, right? I don't know, Katrina, any takeaways that you would approach the listing agreement when you go on a listing appointment?
As far as,
Do you go detail by detail of everything on the contract, or do you have certain bullet points that you just emphasize?
certain points, you're not gonna be able to go over everything, but, I always tell them that upfront that we're gonna go over the main things that you need to know, and the rest are pretty much standard, and read them in time.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome, yeah. Any questions? All right, so be on the lookout for that list, seller objections and possible. I might even do a real live scenario here where I have an agent and I have a seller, and they do it right in front of us right here. Us, role playing, and you're gonna see the good, the bad, and the ugly. I might have a couple people come up here and just kind of give us a listing presentation on how that looks like. Because when you see it, it's easier to comprehend than me just explaining it to you. But when you have a listing agent presenting to a seller, it's the intensity, right? Because the overwhelming feeling is, am I going to get this listing? And everyone that goes on the listing appointment should have some aspect of nervous. You should always feel a little bit of nervous, okay? Because that mentally prepares you. Not saying you have to be nervous, but that helps to build that, that momentum Did you cross every T, cross every line? Do you know exactly what you're gonna do? And if you have a particular script as to what you're gonna do, right? Everything should be systematic. Like for me, when I go in a listing appointment, the first thing I want to do is, can I see the property in the eyes of how the buyer would see it? So let me walk the house. I don't need the seller to show me the house. Now, if it's a very unique property that there's bullet points that I need to know, then that's when I will have the conversation, because I'm jotting it down as I'm going through the property. When I sit down with the sellers, well, tell me a little bit about this. Tell me a little bit about that. What does that mean to you? Tell me, and then that's where I start writing my notations. That's what true agents do. But you want to walk the property to make sure that you know exactly what the property looks before you sit down. Because remember, you want to go in and out as fast as possible. Time of the essence. You don't want to spend 6 hours, right? That's not the intent of it. You want to go in there knowing, reinsuring, walking out with an agreement. Okay, that's the intent. The faster, that way you can move on to your next listing. And there's agents that are doing 4 to 5 listing appointments consistently on a given day or on a given week. Okay, and some they get, some they don't, but they consistently go after listing appointments. Okay, so I'll share that with you on our next call. Any final questions before we close out? All right, you guys are awesome. Zoom, thank you very much. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next class.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.